The cold seeped through the thin silk of my ruined wedding gown, a ghostly chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. It was the cold of 100 hostile eyes, the frost of pure, unadulterated hatred. I stood on a dais in the heart of the Marvel stronghold, a fortress of black stone and snarling gargoyles, with the scent of pine, iron, and old blood clinging to the air. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a desperate drumbeat in the suffocating silence. Before me sat Leontis's war council, elders whose faces were maps of old scars and bitter campaigns. They looked at me not as a person, but as a blight, a spark that had set their world ablaze. This was not a rescue. It was a cage colder than any I had ever known. And as the great iron-bound doors at the end of the hall remained shut, a terrifying thought solidified. The Alpha King who had claimed me had now abandoned me to the wolves. The silence was finally broken by a withered elder, his voice like the grinding of stones. "She is a Vaylora. Her scent is a poison in this hall. You shattered a sacred treaty for this, an Omega." The word was an insult, spat with a venom that made my skin crawl. He didn't look at me, but at the empty throne beside the dais where Leontis was meant to sit. Another elder, a woman with eyes as sharp and gray as flint, spoke next. "Lord Valerius has declared a blood feud. Her pack has allied with the northern clans. They march as we speak, for a slip of a girl who should have been warming another alpha's bed." Humiliation burned hotter than any fire. My hands, still stained with the dust of the shattered altar, clenched into fists at my sides. I was a prize, a spoil of war, a political catastrophe. My wolf, the timid, suppressed Omega within me, whimpered and sought a corner of my soul in which to hide. It recognized the naked aggression of a hostile pack and knew its place, on its belly. But the woman, Cylindra, the one who had prayed for freedom, lifted her chin. I would not let them see me break. A low growl, deeper and more resonant than the rumbling of the earth, silenced them all. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated through the stone floor, up my legs, and settled deep in my bones. The great doors swung inward. Leontis Marval entered, and the very air in the hall grew heavy, charged with the raw power of the Alpha King. He was a storm in the shape of a man, his black hair falling over a brow set in severe lines, his eyes the color of molten gold. He moved with a predator's grace that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. He did not look at his counsel. His gaze found me, and in that instant, the world narrowed to the space between us. The primal, undeniable pull of the mate bond flared to life, a searing heat that chased the cold from my limbs and made my own wolf stir, not in fear, but in something far more dangerous: recognition. "She has a name," Leontis said, his voice a calm thunder that promised violence. He came to a stop before me, turning his broad back to his counsel in a breathtaking display of dominance. He was the shield, and they were the threat. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was electric, a jolt that stole the breath from my lungs. The scent of him, ozone after a lightning strike, ancient earth, and something fiercely, uniquely male, wrapped around me like a cloak. "Her name is Cylindra, and she is your queen." The council erupted. Shouts of treason and madness echoed off the high, vaulted ceilings. The flint-eyed woman rose to her feet. "My king, she cannot be queen. She is unmarked, unsworn. The bond may be a trick, a curse sent by the Vaylora witches to undo us." Leontis's hand fell from my face, and he turned slowly, every line of his body radiating lethal intent. The golden fire in his eyes intensified, and the air crackled. "Her mark is my concern, Lyra. Her throne is your reality. Accept it." He didn't raise his voice, yet the command carried the absolute weight of an avalanche. "You speak of war. Valerius is a pup who barks at my shadow. The northern clans are desperate scavengers. They are not the threat you should be concerned with." He paused, letting his gaze sweep over each defiant face. "The threat is in this room. It is the dissent you nurture. It is the doubt you aim at your alpha. A collective shudder went through the council. He had them. He had them by the throat. Leave us, all of you. They hesitated for a heartbeat, torn between fury and ingrained obedience. But the Alpha's command was law. One by one they rose, their movements stiff with resentment. As the flint-eyed Lyra passed, she gave me a look of such profound loathing it felt like a physical blow. Then they were gone, and the heavy doors boomed shut, leaving me alone with the king who had stolen my life to save it. The silence that descended was heavier than the one before. It was intimate, charged. Without the eyes of his pack on us, the raw power of the bond between us was a physical presence, a swirling vortex in the air. I could feel his emotions as if they were my own. A deep, possessive satisfaction, a current of anger at the disrespect he'd been shown, and beneath it all, a sliver of something I couldn't name. Uncertainty? Are you hurt? He asked, his voice softer now, the thunder receding to a low rumble. I couldn't find my voice. I could only shake my head, my eyes fixed on the harsh, beautiful lines of his face. He was closer than any man had ever been, and every instinct I had was screaming. My omega nature wanted to submit, to bare my throat and accept my fate. But the human part of me, the part that had been a pawn her whole life, was terrified. This was just a different master, a stronger cage. He must have seen the conflict in my eyes. A muscle feathered in his jaw. They are old wolves, Cylindra. They see the world in alliances and bloodlines. They will learn. Learn what? I finally whispered, my voice hoarse. That their king threw their world into chaos for a woman he doesn't even know? His golden eyes darkened. I know everything that matters. My wolf knew you the moment I saw you. It has known you for 1,000 years. He took a step closer, and I instinctively took one back, my heel catching on the hem of my gown. I stumbled, and in a flash, his arms were around me, steadying me. His body was a wall of solid heat and muscle. Pressed against his chest, I could feel the steady, powerful beat of his heart. My own heart stuttered, trying to match its rhythm. The bond surged, a dizzying wave of longing and belonging that was so overwhelming it felt like a violation. I pushed away from him, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Your wolf may know me, but you do not. I wrapped my arms around myself, a futile gesture of defense. You tore me from my home. You declared war on my people. You have no idea what you have done. I know, he said, his voice dangerously soft, that I pulled my mate from the hands of a man who would have broken her. I know that I saved you from a life of gilded misery. Valerius would have used you, paraded you, and forgotten you. I will not. And you, what will you do? The question was a challenge, sharp and desperate. Will you parade me before your snarling council until they decide not to tear me to shreds? Will you put a crown on my head and lock me in this frozen castle? How is that freedom? For the first time, a flicker of something other than command crossed his face. It was a raw, unguarded emotion. Pain. I would burn this world to the ground before I let anyone harm you, he growled, the sound vibrating in his chest. But the bond is not a cage, Cylindra. It is a beginning. It is our beginning. He led me from the great hall, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. It wasn't a gesture of force, but of guidance, of possession. He took me to his private chambers, a vast room that felt like the heart of the mountain. A massive hearth dominated one wall, a fire roaring within it, casting dancing shadows on walls of dark wood and stone. Furs were thrown over heavy carved furniture, and the air smelled of burning pine, leather, and him. It was a starkly masculine space, a den for the apex predator of this land. A large open balcony showed a terrifying drop to the valley below, the peaks of distant mountains like jagged teeth against the bruised twilight sky. He gestured to a chair by the fire. Sit, you are exhausted. I remained standing, my fear a live thing in my throat. I don't understand any of this. You do not have to, he replied, turning to face me. The firelight caught the angles of his face, making him seem both more and less human. You only have to trust me." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Trust? A week ago you were a name in a history book, a boogeyman our elders used to scare children. Today you've made me the most hated woman on the continent. Trust is not something I can afford." His expression hardened again. "You can afford nothing else." He moved toward me, his step silent and deliberate. He stopped just before me, close enough that I had to crane my neck to look up at him. He was immense, a towering figure of power and authority. He lifted his hand and I flinched, expecting a blow, a mark of ownership. Instead, his thumb brushed gently across my cheekbone, his touch surprisingly soft. "I know you are afraid. I can feel it. It tastes like ash in the back of my throat. But your fear is of what you knew, not what is to come." The bond, that treacherous, beautiful thing, hummed between us, weaving my fear with his fierce protectiveness, creating a confusing tapestry of emotion. I felt his frustration, his desperate need to make me understand, to make me see him. Not the king, not the warrior, but the man whose soul was now inextricably tied to mine. My wolf yearned for that touch, craved the security of his strength. It wanted to lean into him, to press my face into the warmth of his chest, and let him handle everything. But I couldn't. Not yet. "They will never accept me," I whispered, the fight draining out of me, leaving only a hollow ache. "I will be a weakness, a target. They will use me to destroy you." "No," he said, his voice dropping to a low, possessive growl that sent shivers down my spine. He leaned in closer, his lips hovering just inches from mine. I could feel the heat of his breath, smell the intoxicating scent of his skin. "You are not my weakness, Cylindra." His gaze dropped to my throat, to the pulse hammering there, and his golden eyes glowed with a feral light. "You are my strength, my power, my queen." And tomorrow at dawn, before the entire pack, I will give you my mark. It will not be a chain, but a shield. It will bind you to me, to this pack, to this mountain. It will be a declaration carved into your very soul, that to touch you is to declare war on me. He paused, his voice becoming a dark, silken promise. "Let them come. Let Valerius and his northern dogs howl at my gates. They will find nothing here but fire and death. For you are mine, and I protect what is mine." His words hung in the air between us, a promise that felt as much like a death sentence as a vow of protection. "I will give you my mark." The fire in the hearth crackled, spitting embers onto the stone, each spark a tiny dying star in the oppressive intimacy of his den. He left me then, with a final searing look that branded itself onto my soul, and the quiet that descended was a living thing, filled with the ghosts of my past and the terrifying specter of my future. I did not sleep. How could I? Sleep was a luxury for the free, and I had never been more thoroughly captive. I paced the vast chamber like a caged animal. My bare feet were silent on the cold stone, the chill a welcome, grounding sensation against the feverish heat coiling in my belly. My wolf, that traitorous primal part of me, was thrumming with a delirious anticipation. The mark, the bite, the final, irrevocable claim. To her, it was the culmination of existence, the promise of belonging, of a place in the pack, of the safety that only the alpha's complete possession could offer. She urged me toward the furs, palled on his massive bed, wanting to curl into his scent, to steep in his essence and wait for him like a faithful bitch. I fought her. I fought with every ounce of my human will. I went to the balcony, stepping out into the biting wind that whipped my tattered wedding dress around my legs. The sheer drop was dizzying, the valley below a black bottomless pit dotted with the distant, mocking lights of small villages. The air was thin and sharp, smelling of snow and pine. It was the scent of my new prison. This mark wasn't a shield. It was the final bar on the cage door, locking me in with this terrifying, possessive man and his hostile pack. Valerius would have owned my title, my body for an heir. Leontis was demanding my soul. The thought sent a tremor of pure panic through me, so violent my teeth chattered. "You are cold." His voice came from the darkness of the chamber behind me. I hadn't heard him approach. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. He stood in the frame of the balcony doors, a silhouette against the firelight. He had shed his heavy leather tunic and wore only dark trousers, his chest bare. The flickering light played over the hard planes of his torso, highlighting a road map of old scars. Thin white lines from claws, a puckered circle from an arrowhead, each one a testament to the violence that defined his life. He was magnificent and terrifying. He held out a bundle of white fur. "This is for the ceremony. It will be cold on the precipice." I stared at the offering, my arms wrapped tightly around my waist. "I don't want it. It is not a request." He stepped onto the balcony with me, and the space that had felt vast and empty suddenly felt dangerously small. He was a furnace of heat in the frozen air. He unfolded the bundle. It was a simple sleeveless tunic and leggings made from the pelt of a snow wolf, softer than anything I had ever touched. It was a garment for a warrior, for a she-wolf of the mountains, not a sacrificial lamb in silk. "You cannot mark me against my will," I whispered, the words a last desperate defiance. "The bond will curdle. It will poison us both." It was an old law, one of the few that protected Omegas. The mark required consent, however grudging. He looked away from me, out at the jagged peaks that tore at the star-dusted sky. A muscle worked in his jaw. "Do you believe I would force you?" His voice was low, strained. "I have fought my entire life, Cylindra. I fought for my father's throne when he was murdered by traitors. I fought the northern hordes for 20 winters. I have fought famine, plague, and dissent within my own council. I have never once tired of the fight." He turned his head, his molten gold eyes finding mine in the gloom. "But I am tired of being alone." The admission was a crack in his granite facade, a glimpse of a raw, aching vulnerability that stunned me into silence. The Alpha King, the great Leontis Marval, was lonely. The bond between us trembled, carrying the truth of his words like a current. It wasn't just a political act, not just a claim of possession. He needed this. He needed me. "Your fear, I feel it as my own," he continued, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't decipher. "But what you fear is the past. My mark is not Valerius's vow. It is not an arrangement of power. It is a promise that wherever you are, I will find you. That whatever pain you feel, I will feel it with you. That my strength will be yours to command. It is the only way I can truly protect you." He held out the furs again. "Please." That one word, "please," from a man who commanded kings, shattered the last of my resistance. My wolf surged forward, recognizing the plea of its mate. With trembling fingers, I took the furs from him. His skin brushed mine, and a jolt of pure energy shot up my arm. I retreated back into the warmth of the chamber to change. My back turned to him, feeling his gaze on me like a physical touch. The silk of my wedding dress fell to the floor in a ruined puddle, and I pulled on the soft, warm wolf pelts. They fit as if they were made for me, clinging to my body, imbuing me with a strange foreign sense of strength. When I turned back to face him, his eyes were blazing, his control stretched taut. The sky was beginning to bleed with the soft gray light of dawn as he led me from the room. The corridors of the fortress were lined with his warriors, silent, massive figures who stood like stone sentinels. Their eyes, all of them, were on me. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their suspicion, their grudging respect for their alpha's choice. Lyra stood among them, her face a mask of cold fury, her flint-gray eyes promising a future of conflict. I lifted my chin, drawing strength from the solid presence of Leontis at my side. His hand found the small of my back, a gesture of possession and support, and he guided me forward. The ceremony was held on the highest point of the stronghold, an open-air precipice of flat black rock known as the King's Hand. The wind was a living thing up here, tearing at us, filled with the scent of the coming snow. The entire pack was assembled, hundreds of them, their forms shifting and indistinct in the pre-dawn gloom. They stood in a great semicircle, their collective gaze a palpable force. As the sun's first rays broke over the eastern mountains, painting the clouds in shades of blood and gold, a hush fell over the crowd. An old wolf, the stone-faced elder from the council, stepped forward. His voice, when he spoke, was carried on the wind. "We are witness to the joining. The Alpha King claims his Luna, a bond of fate, a union of souls. The pact is sacred. The law is absolute." He looked from Leontis to me. "Present the vows of the Fang." Leontis turned me to face him. He took both of my hands in his grip firm and warm. His golden eyes searched mine, asking a silent question. "Are you ready?" I gave a short, jerky nod, my heart a wild bird beating against the cage of my ribs. "I, Leontis of the House Maraval," he began, his voice a deep, clear thunder that defied the howling wind, "offer my fang to your throat, my strength to your shield, my life for your breath." The words were ancient, primal, a vow that went deeper than any human promise. It was my turn. The old wolf looked at me, his expression unreadable. I took a shaky breath, the frigid air burning my lungs. "I, Cylindra of the House Valora," I started, my voice thin but clear, "offer my throat to your fang, my heart to your keeping, my breath for your life." A murmur rippled through the pack. Leontis's hands tightened on mine. He turned me around gently, my back pressed against his chest. His arms came around me, holding me securely as he bent his head. I instinctively tilted my head to the side, baring the sensitive skin of my neck and shoulder. I could feel the heat of his breath, hear the low, possessive growl rumbling deep in his chest. This was it, the final surrender. My wolf was ecstatic, a hair's breadth from forcing my own shift. He nuzzled the juncture of my neck and shoulder, his lips and teeth scraping lightly against my skin, sending shivers of fire through my entire body. The pack watched in absolute silence, 100 predators witnessing the most sacred of rituals. Then he bit. A sharp, searing pain, white-hot and blinding, lanced through me. I cried out, my fingers digging into the hard muscle of his forearms. But the pain lasted only a second, and then it was gone, replaced by an explosion of pure, unadulterated sensation. It was a tidal wave of light and heat and power, crashing through every barrier I had ever erected. The bond which had been a taut cord between us now became a blazing conduit, and his soul poured into mine. I felt it all, a crushing, eons-old loneliness that was now, in an instant, completely gone. A fierce, savage protectiveness that was so absolute it was terrifying. An ocean of love, deep and unconditional, that he had never shown to another living soul. And beneath it all, a wave of profound, soul-shaking relief. He had found me. He was no longer alone. My own wolf howled in triumph within my mind, meeting his, submitting and celebrating in the same breath. Our hearts beat in perfect thundering unison. We were one. A collective howl rose from the pack, a symphony of wild, primal acceptance that shook the very foundations of the mountain. They were saluting their Luna. My knees went weak, and I sagged against him, completely overwhelmed. He held me up, his teeth still locked in my flesh for a moment longer before he finally released me, licking the wound clean. A tingling warmth spread from the mark, a web of golden energy knitting my flesh back together, sealing his claim forever. But as the chaotic, beautiful flood of his emotions began to settle within me, something else flashed through the bond. It was not a feeling, but an image, a memory, his memory. Snow. Blinding white snow stained with blood. A woman lying on the ground, her dark hair a stark contrast to the crimson and white. Her eyes, the same shade of frightened blue as my own, were wide and vacant. She was dying, and Leontis was kneeling over her, his hands covered in her blood, a scream of pure, animal agony tearing from his throat. A name. It wasn't my name. The vision was gone as quickly as it came, leaving me breathless and shaking for an entirely different reason. The joy of the bond was still there, a warm, golden sea, but now, in its depths, swam a cold, dark secret, a ghost. He had felt this before, this desperation, this loss. He had loved another woman with my eyes. He turned me in his arms, his face alight with a fierce, triumphant joy. "My mate," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. He looked down at me, expecting to see his own elation reflected in my face, but he must have seen the shadow of the vision in my eyes, the sudden confusion, the flicker of a new and terrible fear. His smile faltered, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "Cylindra, what is it?" Before I could answer, before I could even process the horrific memory I had just witnessed, a horn blew from the valley below, a single, mournful, urgent blast. A warrior from the watchtower shouted, his voice laced with alarm. "Alpha! Banners on the western pass! The silver wolf of Valerius! It is an army!" Leontis's head snapped up. The brief moment of peace shattered. The joy in his eyes was instantly replaced by the cold fire of the Alpha King. He looked from the valley to me, and then down at the fresh, shimmering mark on my shoulder. His hand came up to cut my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. "The fight is here," he said, his voice a low, deadly growl. But his eyes were locked on mine, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the army at his gates. He was talking about the secret I now carried, the ghost I had just seen. The bond showed me his love, but it had also shown me his scars. And I was suddenly terrifyingly certain that the deepest wounds were the ones he had no intention of ever letting me see. The mountain air, once a symbol of my stolen freedom, now tasted of war. The idyllic peace of dawn was a distant memory, replaced by the clang of steel on steel from the armory below, and the guttural shouts of commands. From the balcony of Leontis's chambers, I could see the valley floor swarming with the enemy. Valerius's banners, bearing the snarling silver wolf of his clan, were a pox upon the pristine landscape. They were setting up siege lines, their numbers a testament to the alliances my broken betrothal had forged against the Alpha King, against me. Leontis had swept out of the room moments after the horn blew, the tender mate replaced by the ruthless monarch. The bond, my new and turbulent companion, was a torrent of his emotions. I felt the cold, calculating fury he directed at the army below, a rage as sharp and clean as a shard of obsidian. I felt his fierce, possessive concern for his people, a heavy weight of responsibility that settled in my own chest. Entangled within it all was his awareness of me, a constant low thrum of possessive energy, a silent promise that he would return. But it was the vision that haunted me. The image was burned into my mind. Snow, blood, and a woman with my face, her life seeping away under Leontis's desperate hands. Liana. The name was a whisper in the soul I now shared with him, a ghost at the feast of our new bond. The joy of the marking, the overwhelming feeling of belonging, was now tainted by a chilling question. Was I just a replacement? A cosmic echo of a love he had lost? The bond screamed that his feelings for me were real, a blazing inferno of possession and devotion. But how could I trust what I felt when his past was a locked room he refused to let me enter? I was a queen in a castle I didn't know, a Luna to a pack that despised me, and a mate to a man whose heart was scarred by a grief he would not share. I touched the fresh mark on my shoulder. It tingled with his power, a permanent brand of his ownership. It was meant to be my shield, but it felt like a conduit for his pain, as much as his love. A sharp knock came at the door. 2 she-wolves I didn't recognize entered, their expressions carefully neutral. "The Alpha King has summoned you to the War Council, my Luna," one said, the title feeling stiff and unnatural on her tongue. They brought with them a simple tunic of dark gray wool and leather leggings, practical clothes for a castle at war. I changed numbly, my mind still reeling. The War Council chamber was the same grand hall where I had been judged hours before, but now it was transformed. A massive table carved with a map of the surrounding territories dominated the center of the room. Leontis stood at its head, not a king on a throne, but a general among his soldiers. His elders, including the flint-eyed Lyra, were gathered around him, their faces grim. The air was thick with the scent of anxiety, old leather, and sharpening steel. When I entered, all conversation stopped. Every eye turned to me. If they had hated me before, now their gazes were complicated by the shimmering, visible mark on my shoulder. I was his. That was an undeniable fact. But I was still the cause of the army at their gates. Leontis's gaze met mine across the room. The bond flared, and for a moment I felt a wave of pure, undiluted reassurance from him. A silent command to be strong. He gestured to the empty chair at his right hand. "My Luna will join us," he stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. I walked toward him, my head held high, though my knees felt weak. Every step was an ordeal, the weight of their resentment a physical force. I took my seat, acutely aware of Lyra's cold stare from across the table. "Valerius is arrogant," Leontis said, turning his attention back to the map. His finger traced the western pass. "He believes our strength is in these walls. He will try to starve us out, break our morale. He does not know the heart of this mountain." "He has brought the northern clans with him," Lyra countered, her voice sharp. "They are savages, but they know how to scale rock. They will test the high watchtowers." "Let them try," another elder growled. "They will find only death." I listened as they spoke of strategy, of flanking maneuvers and supply lines, of the strength of their warriors versus the sheer numbers of the enemy. I was a ghost in the room, a symbol of the conflict, but not a part of its resolution. My purpose had been served when Leontis bit me. Now I was a precious object to be guarded. The realization was galling. Hours later, the council finally broke. Leontis remained behind, poring over the map. The others filed out, but as Lyra passed me, she paused. "He has put a crown of fire on your head, little Omega," she murmured, her voice too low for Leontis to hear. "I pray you do not let it burn us all." Then she was gone, leaving a trail of icy hostility in her wake. Finally, we were alone. The setting sun cast long, blood-red shadows across the hall. Leontis straightened up from the table, rubbing the back of his neck with a weary sigh. The weight of his kingdom was on his shoulders, and through the bond, I felt the crushing exhaustion he refused to show his men. He came to me, his large hands resting on the arms of my chair, caging me in. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. The simple contact was electric. "I am sorry you had to see that," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This is not how I wanted to begin our life." The ghost was between us again, a cold presence in the warm circle of his arms. I had to know. I couldn't let it fester. "Leontis," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "When you marked me, I saw something, in your mind." His body went rigid. He pulled back, his face becoming a mask of stone. The warmth in his golden eyes was extinguished, replaced by a guarded, shuttered look. "The bond is new. It is volatile, intrusive." "I saw her," I whispered, the word tearing at my throat. "I saw a woman dying in the snow." "You called her Liana." The name struck him like a physical blow. A wave of pure, undiluted agony washed over me through the bond, so intense it stole my breath. It was followed by a flash of white-hot anger. Not at me, but at the memory itself, at his own powerlessness. He turned away from me, stalking over to the massive hearth, his back a wall of tense muscle. "You have no right," he growled, his voice dangerously low. "No right?" I stood, my own anger flaring to life, fueled by hurt and fear. "You have bound my soul to yours. Her ghost is standing between us right now, and I have no right to ask who she is?" He slammed his fist against the stone mantle of the fireplace, and the sound echoed like a crack of thunder. "She is the past. She is dead." He whirled to face me, his eyes blazing with a feral, grief-stricken light. "She was my chosen mate, not my fated one. We were to be married. The northern clans ambushed our hunting party, an arrow meant for me." He choked on the words, the memory too raw, too painful. "She died in my arms, Is that what you wanted to know? Does her tragedy satisfy your curiosity?" The cruelty of his words was a slap in the face, but the torrent of pain I felt from him told a different story. He was lashing out because he was wounded. "She had my eyes, Leontis," I said softly, the accusation at the heart of my fear. He flinched. "Do not," he snarled, taking a step toward me, his power rolling off him in suffocating waves. "Do not ever imply that you are a replacement for her. The fates gave you to me. The bond between us is a sacred fire that has been prophesied for 1,000 years. What I had with her was a candle flame in comparison. You insult me, and you insult the bond by speaking her name in the same breath." He grabbed my arms, his grip bruising. He pulled me against him, his face inches from mine. "Feel it, Cylindra," he commanded, his voice a raw whisper. "Feel what is in my heart for you, not a memory, not a ghost, you." He forced my awareness inward, into the bond, and I felt it again. The raging, possessive, all-consuming love he had for me. It was a tidal wave, utterly real and powerful, and it dwarfed the sharp, aching grief for Liana. He loved me, my alpha loved me, but the ghost was still there, a shard of ice in the golden sea of his love. He loved me, yes, but Liana's memory was a wound that had never healed, and Valerius and the northern clans were the salt being rubbed into it. He finally released me, his anger spent, leaving only a hollow exhaustion in its wake. "The war with Valerius is not just about you," he said, his voice flat. "The northern clans who ride with him. They are the same ones who killed her. This is a war of vengeance I have waited years to wage. You were just the spark that lit the flame." His words, meant perhaps to absolve me of guilt, only made it worse. I was not just a political prize, I was a convenient excuse, a tool for his revenge. The knowledge settled like a stone in my stomach. Before either of us could say another word, a warrior appeared at the door. "Alpha, the prisoner has been secured." Leontis nodded, his kingly mask firmly back in place. "I will be there." He turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Stay here. Do not leave these chambers." It was a command, not a request. He strode from the room without a backward glance, leaving me alone with the crackling fire and the chilling echoes of our conversation. I stood there for a long time, my heart a tangled mess of conflicting emotions. I felt his love, but I also felt like a pawn in a game whose rules I didn't understand. The sound of a soft footstep behind me made me jump. I spun around to see Lyra standing in the shadows near the doorway. She must have slipped in after Leontis left. "Forgive my intrusion, Luna," she said, her voice smooth as polished stone. She stepped into the light, her flint-gray eyes assessing me. "The Alpha is protective. He sees only his mate, but I see a fortress with an enemy at the gates and a ghost in its halls." I stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" she asked, a faint knowing smile playing on her lips. "Liana's death nearly broke him. It made him reckless. The elders feared he would lead us all to ruin in his quest for vengeance. We thought time had tempered him, but now—" She gestured vaguely towards the window, towards the siege fires in the valley. "Now he has a new reason to be reckless. A reason with the same blue eyes." Her words twisted the knife he had already placed in my heart. "What do you want, Lyra?" "I want what is best for this pack. What is best for him," she said, her sincerity almost believable. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "There is an old prophecy, known only to the elders of the Maraval line. It speaks of a time when the Alpha King would be weakened by grief. It says that an Omega Queen with the eyes of the fallen would be his fated mate. A test from the fates themselves." I stared at her, my blood running cold. "A test?" "The prophecy says she will either be his salvation or his doom," Lyra continued, her eyes boring into mine. "It says her heart must be tested, that she alone will have the clarity to see the true threat, that she must uncover the serpent hiding within our walls, a traitor who seeks to use the Alpha's grief and this war to bring him down." A serpent, a traitor. The The words hung in the air, heavy with poison and possibility. The Alpha King sees only his enemies outside the walls, Lyra finished, her gaze intense. But the prophecy warns the most venomous snake is the one coiled by the hearth. You are his mate. Your bond gives you insight he lacks. He is blinded by you and by his past. Only you can see the truth. She gave me a curt nod, her duty done. Be careful who you trust, Luna. She turned and slipped out of the room as silently as she had arrived, leaving me in the flickering firelight, my world tilting on its axis. A prophecy, a serpent in the court. Leontis was fighting a war on two fronts, and he didn't even know it. And I, the unwanted Omega Queen, was apparently the only one who could save him. But as Lyra's final words echoed in my mind, a chilling thought took root. She had just warned me not to trust anyone. And the person who delivered that warning was Lyra herself. Lyra's words coiled in my mind like the serpent she described, venomous and unsettling. A prophecy, a traitor. Was it a genuine warning, or a clever manipulation designed to isolate me, to sow seeds of doubt between me and the one man I was supposed to trust implicitly? The bond pulsed with Leontis's distant emotions, the cold fury of interrogation, the iron will of a king preparing for battle. But it offered no clarity on the politics of his court. I was adrift in a sea of snarling wolves, and I didn't know who was friend and who was foe. I couldn't stay in that room. His command to remain was a cage, and I had to breathe. Ignoring his order, I slipped out of the royal chambers. The fortress was a hive of activity, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of my solitude. Warriors sharpened blades, their faces grim in the flickering torchlight. She-wolves prepared poultices and bandages, the scent of antiseptic herbs a sharp counterpoint to the smell of steel. No one paid me any mind. I was a ghost in their midst, the Luna they did not know and did not want. I found my way to the battlements, the same windswept precipice where I had been marked. The night was clear and cold, the stars like chips of ice in the black velvet sky. Below, the siege fires of Valerius's army stretched across the valley like a malevolent constellation. Their sheer number was breathtaking. How could we possibly survive this? I felt a tremor of fear, not for myself, but for this mountain, for this pack, for the man who now held my soul in his hands. The view is daunting, is it not? I jumped, spinning around to see the old elder from the council, the one who had officiated the marking. His name was Cassian, I recalled Leontis saying. He stood cloaked in shadow, his face a roadmap of ancient battles. He didn't look at me, but at the enemy camp below. They believe numbers will win this war, he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. They do not understand the mountain, or its alpha. He turned his gaze on me, and his eyes, though clouded with age, were sharp and discerning. And they do not understand the Luna. I wrapped my arms around myself, wary of his intentions. I am not what they think I am. No, he agreed, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. You are not. Lyra believes the prophecy speaks of a choice you must make, to save him or to destroy him. She is a fine warrior, but she reads the old words with a warrior's mind. All she sees is the potential for betrayal. My heart hammered against my ribs. You know of the prophecy. I am the keeper of histories. I know all the old words, he said. He took a step closer, his presence not threatening, but strangely calming. The prophecy does not speak of a choice, Luna. It speaks of a purpose. It says the Omega Queen will not be a weakness, but a key. That she will see what the Alpha, blinded by his own strength, cannot. He looked pointedly at me. It says she will have the heart of the pack, even when the pack does not have hers. The heart of the pack. The words resonated deep within me, a chord of truth in a symphony of lies and half-truths. My gaze drifted back to the fortress, to the warriors preparing for a war I had caused. How can I have their heart when all they see is an enemy? I whispered, the question an ache in my throat. You show them yours, Cassian replied simply. The Alpha fights for his territory. The Luna fights for his people. Go to the infirmary. Go to the kitchens. Go to the children's creche. They will not see a Velora. They will see their queen." He gave me a slight bow, a gesture of respect that stunned me, and then he was gone, melting back into the shadows as silently as he had appeared. His words lingered, a small glowing ember of hope in the suffocating darkness of my uncertainty. The Luna fights for his people. For the first time since I was torn from the altar, I had a sense of purpose beyond simply surviving. I would not be a pawn. I would not be a weakness. I would be what the prophecy demanded. I found the infirmary tucked into the heart of the mountain, a series of caves lit by glowing moss and smelling of blood and herbs. It was already starting to fill with the injured, a warrior who had fallen from a watchtower, a scout with an arrow in his shoulder from a skirmish at the pass. The healers, mostly older she-wolves, worked with a grim, practiced efficiency. They glanced at me when I entered, their expressions guarded, but they did not stop me. I approached a young warrior, barely more than a boy, whose leg was being stitched up by a stern-faced healer. His face was pale with pain, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. I knelt beside his cot, ignoring the healer's surprised look. "What is your name?" I asked softly. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and suspicion. "Rorik, my Luna." "You are brave, Rorik," I said, gently placing my hand on his forehead. It was a simple, instinctive gesture. Through the bond with Leontis, a sliver of his alpha power flowed through me. I felt a strange warmth spread from my palm, a calming energy that I didn't know I possessed. Rorik's tense body relaxed, his breathing evening out. The pain in his eyes lessened. "Thank you, my Luna," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The stern-faced healer looked at me, her expression softening from suspicion to a grudging respect. I stayed for hours, moving from cot to cot, offering water, speaking words of comfort, and channeling that strange, calming warmth that seemed to flow from the Alpha's mark on my shoulder. I was not a healer, but I could soothe their pain. I could ease their fear. By the time I left, the atmosphere in the infirmary had changed. The suspicion was gone, replaced by whispers of gratitude. I was no longer just the Alpha's mate. I was their Luna. My tour took me to the kitchens next, where a frantic energy reigned. Wolves were preparing rations for the warriors, their movements economical and stressed. I didn't speak. I simply picked up a knife and began chopping vegetables. I fell into the rhythm of the work, my hands moving automatically. After a long silence, a stout she-wolf working beside me grunted. "The Velora queen knows her way around a kitchen." It wasn't a compliment, but it wasn't an insult either. It was a statement of fact, an observation, and for now, that was enough. The first attack came just before dawn. A volley of flaming arrows arced through the sky, thudding against the stone walls of the fortress. The war horns blew, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through my bones. From the battlements, I watched as Leontis directed his forces. He was a terrifying, magnificent sight, his voice a thunderous roar that cut through the chaos of battle. He moved with a deadly grace, his silver sword a blur of motion, cutting down any of the northern savages who were foolish enough to make it over the walls. The bond was a raging inferno. I felt his battle lust, his focus, the pure, adrenalized thrill of the fight. It was intoxicating and terrifying, but beneath it, I could also feel his awareness of his pack, a mental map of where every single one of his warriors was, how they were faring. And I felt his constant, unwavering connection to me, a thread of silver in the tapestry of blood and fire. He knew I was watching. He was fighting for me. The first assault was repelled. The sun rose on a field of bodies and the stench of death. The victory was decisive, but the cost was high. The infirmary was overflowing now. I worked tirelessly alongside the healers, my hands stained with blood, my body aching with exhaustion, but I did not stop. For every life I helped save, for every warrior I comforted, I felt the pack's acceptance growing, shifting from grudging tolerance to genuine respect. They saw me, not the Velora Omega, not the cause of their war, but their Luna, with blood on her hands and their people in her heart. Later that day, Leontis found me there, He stood in the entrance to the infirmary, his armor dented and smeared with blood, his face streaked with grime. He was splattered with the gore of his enemies, yet I had never seen anything more beautiful. He said nothing. He just watched me as I finished bandaging a warrior's arm. The warrior looked from me to his alpha, a look of profound loyalty in his eyes. The Luna is a blessing, my alpha. She has the heart of a true she-wolf. Leontis's gaze met mine over the warrior's head. The pride and love that flowed through the bond were so overwhelming, so pure, it made my knees weak. He had seen what I had done. He understood. He waited for me outside. When I emerged, weary and blood-stained, he pulled me into his arms, crushing me against his hard body. He didn't care about the dirt or the blood. He buried his face in my hair, inhaling my scent as if he were a dying man and I was his last breath. "My mate," he rasped, his voice thick with an emotion that went deeper than words. "My brave Luna." He held me at arm's length, his hands framing my face, his golden eyes searching mine. "Cassian told me what he said to you, about the heart of the pack." "He was right," I said, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I know." He brushed a stray blood-matted strand of hair from my cheek. "But the fight is not over. Valerius is a dog, but he is a persistent one. He will attack again." He looked back towards the infirmary. "And we are losing warriors faster than we can spare them." A new wave of fear washed over me. I could feel his worry through the bond, a cold dread that lay beneath the surface of his commander's confidence. "What will we do?" His expression hardened. "We will endure. The Maraval pack has held this mountain for 1,000 years. We do not break." He hesitated, and a flicker of something dark and dangerous crossed his face. "But I will not let my people die for a war of my making. There is another way, an older way." "What are you talking about?" I asked, a sense of foreboding creeping up my spine. He pulled me with him, leading me away from the infirmary, deeper into the fortress, to a section I had never seen before. We stopped before a massive iron-bound door carved with ancient runes. It felt old, powerful. Leontis pressed his hand to the door, and it swung open with a low groan. Inside was a small circular chamber. The walls were covered in carvings, depicting epic battles between shifters and ancient beasts. But the centerpiece of the room was a stone altar, and upon it lay a single wickedly curved dagger with a hilt of yellowed bone. The air in the room was thick with old magic, so potent it made the hair on my arms stand up. "What is this place?" I whispered. "The Chamber of the Last Stand," Leontis said, his voice grim. He walked over to the altar and picked up the dagger, handling it with a strange reverence. When an alpha king is faced with an unwinnable war, when the annihilation of his pack is certain, he can invoke the old magic, the ritual of the Blood King. He turned to face me, the dagger held loosely in his hand. "The alpha sheds his own blood upon this altar, a sacrifice to the mountain itself. In return, the mountain lends him its strength. He becomes more. A primal force of nature, unstoppable, able to turn the tide of any battle." It sounded like a miracle. "Then why haven't you done it already?" A shadow passed over his features. The bond carried a wave of cold, bleak despair. "Because the power comes at a cost. The magic is hungry. It demands a balance. The strength it grants the alpha is borrowed." He looked at the dagger, then at me, his golden eyes filled with a terrible, agonizing pain. "It is borrowed from his mate." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "The magic feeds on the bond," he explained, his voice flat and dead. "It draws on your life force to fuel my power. The more strength I take, the weaker you will become. If I were to draw on its full power, it would kill you." He let out a harsh, broken sound that was half laugh, half sob. "The fates are cruel. They give me my fated mate, the other half of my soul, only to present me with a choice. Let my people be slaughtered or sacrifice you to save them." I stared at him, at the raw agony etched on his face, the impossible choice tearing him apart. And in that moment, I understood everything. The prophecy, Lyra's warning, Cassian's words, the Luna fights for his people. This was the true test, not uncovering a serpent in the court, but this. He thought the choice was his. He was wrong. I walked toward him, my steps sure and steady. I took the dagger from his unresisting hand. Its bone hilt was cold against my skin. I turned to the altar, my heart calm, my purpose clear. "Cylindra, no," he whispered, his voice cracking. He reached for me, but I held up a hand to stop him. "You said it yourself, Leontis," I said, my voice ringing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "The Luna fights for the people." I looked at him, my alpha, my mate, the man who was being forced to choose between his love and his duty. I would not let him make that choice. I would make it for him. And the Alpha King does not fight alone. I raised the dagger, the torchlight glinting off its razor-sharp edge. "What do I have to do?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. The bond between us was a torrent of his horrified protest, his desperate plea for me to stop. But beneath it all, I could also feel a sliver of his awe, his dawning realization of the strength of the Omega he had claimed. He had wanted a queen. He was about to get one. His protest was a silent scream in my mind, a tidal wave of negation that crashed against the shores of my resolve. "No, Cylindra, do not do this." The bond was a live wire, humming with his agony and his fierce, desperate love. He took a step toward me, his body a taut line of controlled violence, every instinct in him screaming to rip the dagger from my hand, to lock me away where the world and its impossible choices could never touch me again. "You don't know what you're asking," he rasped, his voice raw. The king was gone. The commander vanished. In his place was only the male, the mate, terrified of losing the other half of his soul. "It will drain you. It will feel like your bones are turning to dust, your blood to ice. I will not be the cause of your pain." I met his gaze, my own will a fortress against his despair. "And I will not be the reason your people die," I countered, my voice steady. "You told me my mark was a shield, that your strength would be mine to command. This is no different. My strength is yours, my life is yours." That was the vow I made on the precipice. I held the ancient dagger, its bone hilt now warm in my hand. "Tell me what to do, Leontis. Tell me how to save our people." The word "R" hung in the air between us. It was a claim, a declaration. I was no longer the Velora Omega. I was the Luna of the Maraval pack. A profound soul-shaking shift occurred in the bond. His frantic terror did not subside, but it was now joined by a wave of stunned, overwhelming pride. He looked at me not as something fragile to be protected, but as an equal, as his queen. He finally gave a slow, defeated nod, the surrender costing him everything. He walked to my side, his presence a solid wall of heat and power. His hand covered mine on the hilt of the dagger, his fingers wrapping around my own. The contact sent a jolt of pure energy through me, a preview of the power we were about to unleash. "The ritual requires a vow and a sacrifice," he explained, his voice low and grim, his lips close to my ear. "A vow of unity and a sacrifice of blood. Both of our bloods mingled. The magic must recognize that we are one, that my power is drawn from a willing source." He guided my hand, the one holding the dagger, over the stone altar. With his other hand, he took my free one, turning it palm up. "The vow first," he murmured. His golden eyes locked with mine, and the world outside the small chamber ceased to exist. "I, Leontis, Alpha of the Maraval, bind my strength to my Luna. Her heart is my fortress. Her breath is my banner." I took a deep breath, the ancient magic in the room seeming to flow into my lungs. "I, Cylindra, Luna of the Maraval, bind my life to my Alpha. His will is my shield. His victory is my purpose." Our voices intertwined, echoing off the carved walls. A low hum began to emanate from the stone altar, a deep, resonant vibration that I could feel in the soles of my feet. The runes on the walls began to glow with a soft, ethereal blue light. "Now," he whispered, his voice tight. "Together." He guided the tip of the dagger to my palm. I did not flinch. I watched as he pressed down, the wicked edge slicing through my skin. A line of crimson welled up, shockingly bright against my pale flesh. The pain was sharp, clean, and utterly insignificant compared to the agony I saw in his eyes as he inflicted the wound. Before a single drop could fall, he moved with lightning speed, slicing his own palm with the same blade. He then pressed his bleeding hand against mine, our blood mingling, hot and vital. He held our joined hands over the altar. "One soul," he intoned, his voice a powerful command. "One heart, one pack." Our mingled blood dripped onto the cold stone. The moment it touched the surface, the low hum became a roar. The blue light from the runes flared, bathing the chamber in a brilliant, otherworldly glow. A vortex of raw power erupted from the altar, a tangible force that whipped my hair around my face and sent a tremor through the very foundations of the mountain. It surged into Leontis first. I saw his body arch, his head thrown back as the primal magic of the mountain poured into him. A guttural roar was torn from his throat, a sound that was not entirely human, a cry of both agony and exultation. His muscles bunched and coiled under his skin, and the golden fire in his eyes burned so brightly they were like miniature suns. He was magnificent, terrifying, more than a man, more than a wolf. He was the mountain's fury given form. Then the magic turned to me. It was not a gentle taking, it was a violent, ravenous draining. I felt my life force being pulled from me, siphoned through the bond and into him. A dizzying weakness washed over me, so profound my knees buckled. Leontis's arm shot around my waist, holding me up, his body a furnace of borrowed power while mine grew cold. The world began to gray at the edges of my vision. I felt a chill seep into my bones, a deep, unnatural cold that had nothing to do with the air temperature. My heart rate slowed, each beat a struggle. This is it, I thought with a strange sense of detachment. This is what it feels like to die. Through the bond, I felt Leontis's anguish. He was experiencing my decline as if it were his own, even as the mountain's power surged through his veins. He was a king being crowned and a man being flayed alive, all at the same time. He wanted to stop, to sever the connection, to let the magic go, but he couldn't. The ritual was in motion, and he could hear, as I could, the distant sounds of war horns. The final battle had begun. "Stay with me, Cylindra," he pleaded, his voice a desperate growl in my ear. "Look at me." I forced my heavy eyelids to open. His face was a blur, his features indistinct, but I could see his eyes, those twin golden flames. I focused on them, using them as an anchor in the storm that was trying to tear me apart. I pushed back against the encroaching darkness, not with strength. I had none left, but with sheer will. I would not die. I would not leave him. The drain lessened slightly, from a torrent to a steady river. I was still weakening, but the process had slowed. I had found a sliver of control. I could regulate the flow, giving him what he needed without letting the magic consume me entirely. I was the key. Not just a battery to be drained, but the hand on the spigot. He seemed to feel the change. A wave of desperate relief washed through the bond. He tightened his hold on me, one arm a steel band around my waist, the other hand cradling the back of my head. He pressed his lips to my forehead, a fierce, possessive kiss that was both a promise and a prayer. "I will end this quickly," he vowed. "I will come back for you." Then he was gone. He moved like a blur, a shadow of concentrated rage and power, leaving me leaning heavily against the altar in the pulsating blue light of the chamber. The cold was profound now, and a deep lethargy settled over me. All I wanted to do was slide to the floor and sleep, but I couldn't. I had to maintain the connection. I had to be his anchor. I closed my eyes and focused on the bond. Through his senses, I saw the battle. It was chaos. Valerius's forces, led by a cadre of hulking northern clan berserkers, had breached the main gate. The fighting was hand-to-hand, brutal and bloody. The Maraval warriors were outnumbered, being pushed back into the main courtyard, fighting for every inch of ground. Then Leontis arrived. He didn't run into the fray. He leaped from an upper battlement, landing in the center of the courtyard like a vengeful god. The ground cracked beneath his feet. He was surrounded, but he was not concerned. The blue light of the ritual still clung to him, a faint, shimmering aura. He held no sword. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. A berserker, twice the size of a normal man, roared and charged him, swinging a massive two-handed axe. Leontis didn't even try to dodge. He met the charge head-on, catching the axe blade in his bare hand. There was a grinding screech of metal, but his flesh did not break. With a guttural snarl, he wrenched the axe from the berserker's grip and snapped the thick wooden haft over his knee as if it were a twig. He then drove his fist into the giant's chest. There was a sickening crunch of bone and armor, and the berserker flew backward, crashing into a stone wall and sliding to the ground, motionless. A collective gasp went through the battlefield, from friend and foe alike. They were witnessing something impossible. Leontis became a whirlwind of destruction. He moved with supernatural speed and strength, a blur of motion in the heart of the enemy ranks. He didn't kill with the clean efficiency of a swordsman. He destroyed with the raw, brutal power of a force of nature. He tore through their lines, his every blow shattering shields, breaking bones and sending bodies flying. Valerius's army, which had been on the verge of victory, faltered. Their morale cracked, then shattered. Fear, thick and potent, rolled off them in waves. I saw Valerius himself, standing on a siege tower, his handsome face pale with disbelief and terror. He screamed orders at his men, but they were no longer listening. They were breaking, turning to flee from the demigod who was annihilating them. As I watched through Leontis's eyes, I felt a flicker of something else in the chaos. A presence. It was not a soldier. It was something slithering, cunning. I remembered Lyra's words. The most venomous snake is the one coiled by the hearth. Then I saw her, Lyra. She was not fighting among the main body of warriors. She was slipping through the shadows along the edge of the courtyard, her movements stealthy and purposeful. She was not moving toward the enemy. She was moving toward the passage that led to the heart of the mountain, toward the chamber of the last stand, toward me. A cold dread, entirely separate from the magical chill of the ritual, washed over me. The serpent. She hadn't been warning me about a traitor. She had been telling me who she was. She knew about the ritual. She knew I would be here, alone, weakened. I tried to send a warning to Leontis, to scream through the bond, but my focus was stretched to its limit, maintaining the flow of power, fighting off the encroaching darkness. All I could manage was a weak pulse of fear, a fragile whisper that was lost in the roar of his power and the din of battle. He was too focused. He was a creature of pure instinct now, his entire being bent on the destruction of the army before him. He wouldn't hear me. He wouldn't know until it was too late. The heavy iron door of the chamber creaked open. I struggled to lift my head. Lyra stood there, silhouetted against the torchlight of the corridor. She held a small, wickedly sharp dagger in her hand. Her face was a mask of cold, triumphant fury. "The prophecy was right," she said, her voice dripping with venom. She stepped into the room, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. An Omega Queen would be his doom. She stalked toward me, her gray eyes glittering. "He should have chosen me. I have fought for him, bled for him. I would have made him stronger. But he chose a soft Velora bitch, a weakness, a flaw in his armor. I tried to push myself up from the altar, but my limbs wouldn't obey. I was helpless, my strength being poured into the man she claimed to love, even as she prepared to murder me. He is blinded by this bond," she sneered, gesturing around the glowing room. "He thinks this power will save him. But when he is done, when he returns to find you dead, the shock, the grief of the bond breaking so violently, it will shatter him. He will be an empty shell, and I will be there to pick up the pieces. I will be there to guide the pack, to rule." She stood over me now, the dagger raised. "It is a mercy, really? You have served your purpose. You have given him the power to win the battle, but I will make sure he loses the war." The tip of her dagger hovered just over my heart. I closed my eyes, a single furious tear tracing a path through the grime on my cheek. I had survived my wedding, survived a hostile council, survived a war. To be brought down by a jealous traitor in the dark. I sent one last, desperate surge of love and farewell to Leontis through the bond. "I love you." The words were a silent scream in my soul. I could only hope he heard them before it was too late. The first light of spring crept over the jagged peaks, a soft, golden warmth that felt like a benediction. It streamed through the open balcony doors, chasing the last of the shadows from our chamber and painting a stripe of liquid sunshine across the firs where we lay. For months, this room had been a sanctuary, a den of recovery. Now it was simply home. The air no longer smelled of iron and blood, but of melting snow, damp earth, and the first hardy mountain wildflowers. I woke slowly, cocooned in Leontis's embrace. His arm was a heavy, possessive weight around my waist, his breathing a slow, steady rhythm against my back. The bone-deep chill that had plagued me since the ritual was finally gone, a ghost of a memory that only surfaced on the coldest nights. The magic had taken its toll, leaving me weak and fragile for weeks, but the bond had been a constant conduit of his strength, a gentle warmth that had slowly knit my life force back together. He had poured his vitality into me, as willingly as I had poured mine into him. I shifted, turning in his arms to face him. He was already awake, his golden eyes watching me, soft and unguarded in the morning light. The harsh lines of the king and the warrior were smoothed away, leaving only the man, my mate. He raised a hand, his calloused thumb tracing the faint silvery scar that cut across my palm. A matching one adorned his own, a permanent reminder of the vow we had made in blood and magic. "How do you feel?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through my chest. It was the same question he'd asked me every morning since the battle. "Strong," I answered, and for the first time it was the complete and honest truth. I laced my fingers through his, pressing our scarred palms together. "Whole." A smile touched his lips, a rare, breathtaking thing that transformed his severe features. "Good." He leaned in and captured my mouth in a slow, deep kiss that spoke of lazy mornings and a future unburdened by war. It was a kiss of profound peace, a stark contrast to the desperate, claiming kisses we had shared in the shadow of conflict. Later, we walked through the fortress hand in hand. The mountain stronghold, once a place of fear and hostility, was now a bustling home. The grim-faced warriors who had once looked through me now dipped their heads in genuine respect. "My Luna." The title, once an insult on Lyra's tongue, was now a term of affection. Children who had been hidden away during the siege now ran laughing through the corridors, and they would often stop to present me with a pretty rock or a wild flower they'd found. We passed the great hall where the council was in session. Cassian, the old keeper of histories, now sat at the head of the table, his wisdom guiding the pack through the new peace. He caught my eye through the open doorway and gave me a slow, respectful nod. He had been my first true ally, the one who had told me to find the pack's heart. We found Rorik, the young warrior from the infirmary, sparring in the main courtyard. His leg was fully healed, and he moved with a new confidence. When he saw us, he stopped and bowed deeply. "Alpha, Luna." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering loyalty. "The pack is strong because of you." Leontis's hand tightened on mine, a current of pride flowing between us through the bond. The pack was strong. The war had cost them, but it had also forged them into something new, something more united. My presence, once a catalyst for division, had become a cornerstone of their new strength. We continued our walk, eventually finding ourselves on the precipice, the King's Hand, where I had been parked. The wind was gentle today, carrying the promise of the new season. We stood looking out over the valley, which was now greening under the spring sun. There were no more siege fires, no more enemy banners. The scars on the landscape were already beginning to heal. The last of the northern chieftains bent the knee yesterday, Leontis said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Valerius's clan is broken, scattered to the winds. He fled north, a king with no kingdom, a wolf with no pack. He is a ghost, and he will trouble us no more. The final thread of the war that had defined our beginning was severed. The ghost of Liana, the woman with my eyes whose death had fueled Leontis's vengeance for so long, had finally been laid to rest. Her murderers were defeated, their clans shattered. But I knew, and he knew, that it was not the victory that had healed him. "And Lyra?" I asked softly. His jaw tightened, a flicker of the old coldness in his eyes. "She faced the pack's judgment, as you commanded. They did not call for her death." A hint of surprise still colored his tone when he spoke of it. "They stripped her of her rank, of her name, and cast her out. She is forbidden from ever setting foot on Moroval lands again, on pain of death. To live without a pack, without an alpha, you were right. It is a crueler fate than a quick end." He turned to me, his expression serious. "Your wisdom saved me from becoming a tyrant that day. You saved me from myself." "No," I said, placing my hand on his chest, over the steady beat of his heart. "We saved each other." He covered my hand with his own, the warmth of his skin seeping into mine. The bond was a quiet, constant hum between us, a perfect harmony. It was no longer a confusing torrent of fear and possession, but a deep, abiding river of love, trust, and understanding. We had been forged in fire, our souls tempered into one. I leaned my head against his shoulder, thinking of the night of my wedding, of the terrified girl who had prayed for freedom. I had not known what I was asking for. I had imagined a life of quiet solitude, a small, safe existence free from arranged marriages and political machinations. Instead, the fates had given me this: a kingdom to rule, a pack to protect, and a love so vast and powerful it shook the very foundations of the world. It was not the freedom I had imagined, but it was a freedom of the soul, a freedom to choose my own destiny, to fight for my own people, to love with the ferocity of a wolf. "I once thought this castle was a cage, I whispered, looking at the formidable black stone of the fortress. "And now?" Leontis asked, his arm tightening around me. "Now it is the only home I have ever known." He turned me in his arms, his golden eyes burning with an intensity that still stole my breath. "You are the heart of this mountain, Cylindra. You are the heart of my pack. You are my cart." He lowered his head, his lips hovering just above mine. "The prophecy said you would be my salvation or my doom. It was never a choice. You were always my salvation." He kissed me then, a kiss that sealed every vow, healed every wound, and promised a lifetime of dawns just like this one. As his hand slid from my back to rest gently, hopefully, on my stomach, a new warmth bloomed within me, a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun or the bond. It was the quiet, secret promise of a new life, of an heir for the Alpha King, of a future for the King and his Omega. The war was over, the serpent was banished, the ghosts were at peace, and here, on the roof of the world, our story was just beginning.